ways video games can provide memorable experiences, thrilling set pieces, engaging stories, and for many games, bosses. Now, not every game has to have bosses, but most single-player experiences tend to have them. Bosses can do many things for a game. They can challenge the player's skills, heighten the excitement, or
Dance, water, dance!
Take notes, that one's the most important. But alas, we're not here today to talk about any average Joe boss, no. We are here to talk about the climax, the culmination of the game you are playing. The final boss. The Kingdom Hearts series is already renowned for its amazing bosses, unless you're someone named Ruler of the Sky, so the final bosses have quite the leap to make. Kingdom Hearts contains a large variety of final bosses, and as such, it's only natural to want to rank them, and that's exactly what I'm gonna do, because why not? Before we jump into it, there are a few things I need to say, and I'll make it quick. Firstly, final story bosses and final game bosses are eligible. The difference between the two is that one ends a specific story campaign, such as Aqua Ventus and Terra's stories, while the other one ends the entire game itself, so it would be like the final episode of Birth by Sleep. Secondly, no secret bosses. Sorry Azora, maybe another day. Lastly, please be sure to support the channel by liking and subscribing if you end up enjoying the video, for more content like this. And without further delay, take it away, Epic Music. If any of you are like me, you probably finished through Kingdom Hearts Rechain of Memories and kicked back your feet and let out a sigh of relief and oh god, there's another story mode? Yep, after finishing through Kingdom Hearts Rechain of Memories as Sora, you unlock Riku's story campaign called Reverse Rebirth, which sounds like the name of an abortion clinic. Riku's story mode is generally structured the same as Sora's, just with a different story and combat system. The gameplay never really gives you the option to change your playstyle, unlike Sora, so Riku's gameplay got really tedious to me after a while. Also, all the Disney bosses are the exact same as Sora's, so the only time things change up is in between Disney worlds with the story-related bosses. By the time I had reached the final boss of the campaign, I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty worn out. I had high hopes that the game would have a final boss that would pay off the exhaustion, and yeah, it's just Ansem. Remember the first phase of Ansem you fight on Destiny Islands in Kingdom Hearts 1? Yeah, that's literally all this is. Ansem comes at you with a bunch of high-numbered cards and zeros to make the fight much more difficult than it really should be. The best way to deal with him is to spam card duels and pray. Overall, this fight is fairly anticlimactic and more annoying than anything else. It's fine as a fight on its own right, but it does not feel like a proper final boss, which is what lands it on the bottom. At the end of Dream Drop Distance, Riku goes inside of Sora. Okay, let me try that again. At the end of Dream Drop Distance, Riku has to wake Sora up, so he goes inside of Sora's dreams or something stupid like that. He encounters Ventus's armor, but it's dark and evil and bad. To describe this fight, well, I got two words for ya. Dark goop everywhere. Yeah, this fight is just an incoherent mess of darkness and light flying everywhere. Just spam every button on the controller and you'll be fine. Conceptually, this is a really cool boss, but it goes by very quickly and doesn't meet its full potential in my opinion. It has a neat final move, but that's really about it. Out of all the final battles in Birth by Sleep, Aqua's was my personal least favorite. It's certainly better than the last two final battles on the list, but it's definitely the least epic battle of the three story modes in Birth by Sleep. The Ventus Vanitas fight is essentially just any other fight you've had with Vanitas up to this point, except he's slightly more powerful, he has a bit more range, and you fight with Mickey Mouse himself, so that's kinda neat. It's definitely not a bad boss per se, but as a final boss, it's fairly standard and leaves a lot to be desired. Just to give some perspective, Kingdom Hearts 0.2's final boss is a regular boss in Kingdom Hearts 3 twice. Okay, I'm being a bit harsh. The Demon Tide, also known as a barbershop, does provide quite a thrilling final boss, especially when the game first came out. The boss has two phases. The first phase is very tame as long as you have a basic knowledge on how to dodge or block. The second phase, however, provides much more of a challenge to the player. The Demon Tide essentially becomes a tornado that's on 3 lines of cocaine, but as long as you keep your distance and time your blocks well, you will be fine. However, there is a way you can just completely skip the second phase. If you time your shot locks just right in between the first and second phase and use elixirs, you can end the Demon Tide before it gets the opportunity to transform. The Demon Tide is fun, but like many others lower on the list, it doesn't necessarily have the final boss flair and can be defeated fairly quickly if you know what you're doing. SoranotRoxas' fight is surprisingly okay, especially coming from one of the DS games, which don't have the most consistent quality. This final boss still lands lower on the list though, because while the fight is fun, it's basically just the Kingdom Hearts 2 Roxas fight, except strips 70% of that boss's complexity. It's simple, but fairly effective for a game like Recoded, and deserves credit for being as decent as it is. It's an okay boss for an okay game. And yeah, that's all I can really say about it. I mean, what did you expect? For Recoded's boss to be like in the top 5 or something? I probably just offended like 2 people. Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days is one of my least favorite games in the series in terms of gameplay. It has an amazing story, but the combat system really turned me away from it. I don't like the slot system, I don't like how the combat flows, and the bosses in Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days are mediocre at best, but everything I just said is invalid because Saïx wields a banana, which in turn makes it the best game ever made. All jokes aside, Xion is a surprisingly thrilling final boss for a game I otherwise didn't love that much. Xion has 4 phases in total, and in my opinion, they get better with each and every phase. The first 3 phases are pretty simple with basic movesets and arenas, but it's the final phase that makes the boss so impressive. You fight Xion in giant Keyblade armor, and you have to constantly be on your toes to avoid her AoE attacks. While the fight isn't particularly difficult, it's a nice climactic battle with a lot of emotions, so it makes up for it. It's too bad I can't really remember much of it though. Actually, what were we talking about again? Sora's final boss in Dream Drop Distance is none other than Xemnas, and he puts up quite the fight. He'll constantly hurl buildings at you, trap you in his electric doors, and pulverize you with his many lasers in classic Xemnas fashion. This fight borrows from many previous Xemnas fights, but the great thing is that it works. You have to be very wary not to get caught in his combos or laser spams, and as long as you dodge and counter like an absolute beast, you'll get through it pretty quickly. This boss isn't incredibly grand, but it does get the job done, and it does it well. It's too bad the fight amounts to nothing because Sora doesn't pass the vibe check and gets sent into a deep sleep, and I've never wanted to be Sora more in my life because 2020. I barely even started, and I can already detect many of you about to comment, but wait, young Xehanort isn't the final boss of Dream Drop Distance, you nerd! And you're right, it's Armored Ventus Nightmare from earlier on the list, but I'm qualifying Cogsworth here as Riku's story final boss because this lad feels much more like final boss material than whatever that was. This boss kicked my ass as a kid, and it still kinda does to this day. Ben Diskin loves to teleport all over the place, aggressively swirl at you, and Simon Belmont you to death. Look, there's 2 ways you can beat this boss. Be good at the game, or use balloon magic. I'm personally a fan of the latter myself. One of my favorite parts of this boss is his quick final desperation move he pulls at 1 HP, where he literally encapsulates himself in a clock and sends his shadow clones at you. And if you fail to defeat the weird clock thing, the madman reverses time and restores his HP. While this never happened to me, I can't imagine the frustration of those it happened to. I love the challenge that this boss provides, which puts it a bit higher on the list, but he can be annoying to deal with on higher difficulties for sure. Roxas number 2's final clash with edgy Sora is as epic as anyone could have ever imagined. Vanitas shares a lot of moves from his previous fights yet with the Keyblade in hand, and he is much more potent, aggressive, and impatient than before. And this is probably why.
It's always about your friends, isn't it?
At least I have some.
He will lunge at you in very quick speeds and will teleport behind you every chance he gets. The real reason this boss is so high, however, is that when Vanitas reaches 1 HP, the glass shatters below you and you're left to fight in the air, shooting each other with Keyblade glowy lighty beams until someone dies. It's true beauty, and I love it. After going through Terra's story mode where you watch him be a dense walnut the entire time, you approach the end where the old bald guy possesses Terra's body because youth, and youth is good because you don't die of old age. Yep. And after this happens, Terra acquires a Kaneki profile picture, and then boom! The remains of Terra's fragile mind take form into his Keyblade armor, and then the clash begins. What a great way to start this off. There's a lot to love about this boss. The music, the stakes, and the atmosphere are pure final boss perfection. Not only is this the most difficult final boss of the Wayfinder Trio story modes, but Terra definitely has the most complex moveset. He has a lot of long-lasting combos, dangerous projectiles, and he can even heal himself because of course he can. I find it best to learn the situations where it's good to get close and then the situations where it's best to keep your distance. Sherlock and Kiraga are going to be your best friends during this fight, so be prepared to use them a lot. Overall, this fight is incredibly solid and absolutely deserves a spot in the top 10. The final boss of Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep is, well, the exact same as the last entry, except his bloodlust levels went from 100 to 1000. His first phase is the exact same as the fight as Terra's, but his second phase is where it really hits the fan. He calls upon his enemy stand to help him deal some serious damage, and this is where you really need to take caution. This final boss gets a slight edge over the previous Terranort fight because it's simply deeper, both gameplay-wise and story emotions-wise. I also like playing as Aqua better. I mean, look at those cartwheels, dude. I have very mixed feelings about Rechain of Memories as a whole. On one hand, I love how unique the combat system is, and I appreciate the story quite a bit. On the other hand, however, the gameplay, while I just described it to be unique, did get kind of old to me, mostly due to the repetitive fights and level design. Unlike Reverse Rebirth, however, the final battle proved worth playing through to the end. Like any good final boss, Marluxia's final fight is split into two phases that are very different from each other. For the first phase, Marluxia rides this weird nobody mech thing. He attacks constantly, so you must be ready to break his attacks as much as you can. Luckily, most of his attacks have low numbers, so it isn't too hard to break them, and if you get desperate, you can use slates. Hell, many of his attacks are AoE, so you really have no choice but to break them rather than to resort to dodging. Once you destroy his first phase, you get your typical cheesy Kingdom Hearts battle quote, and the arena turns into, oh my god, what is that, and why do I want to eat it? Actually, here's a better question, why did I write that into the script? Marluxia's second phase can be extremely devastating if you aren't careful. He has an attack that permanently rids of your cards, and one that insta-kills you with a countdown if you don't counter in time. If you don't act fast, you will be at a disadvantage very quickly. Marluxia's final boss is a great final test of the player's reaction times and skills. Marluxia's impressive design lands him to be the king of the side game final bosses. And that death animation though. At the end of the Kingdom Hearts 3 DLC, fans were met with a sweet surprise. For the first time in the franchise's history, we can finally play as Kairi and kick some old man ass. Finally playing as Kairi is not only incredibly satisfying for the fans, but the fight itself is a good challenge and just a wonderful boss in general. It takes the Xehanort fight from base Kingdom Hearts 3 and cranks it up a few layers with more belligerent moves and just pretty to look at attacks. The man goes full Madara mode and sends several meteors down into the arena. He also attacks with all 13 of his Keyblades and several spirals of fire. Everything about this fight is satisfactory, exhilarating, unique, and fun, which puts it towards the top tiers of final bosses. Also, that Sora Kairi special attack gets me every time. God, Remind was amazing, dude. Ansem is without a doubt the longest final boss in the entire series if we're counting his phases before he becomes a large Final Fantasy final boss clone. These phases consist of a fight with Ansem on Destiny Islands, Darkside again, because sure, Ansem again, except I want to die even more this time, and then we get into the juicy stuff. After you destroy Ansem and his dark enemy stand twice, and insult his precious darkness of course, he becomes this large entity that I don't even know how to begin to describe. I mean, what even is the anatomy here? This abomination has so many phases, good god. The first phase, you fight Ansem alone, and literally all he does is slash the air, even if you're not close to him, so he just looks like a madman, and a bunch of beams constantly try to kill you in the process. Once you give him a good slapping, you have to do a couple enemy rushes, and then you have to defeat— oh my god, what the f is that? Once that thing is defeated, you save Donald from eternal damnation. Then once all that is said and done, you gotta destroy the world of Chaos's core. By the way, that's what it's called, I know, super edgy, which also looks incredibly uncomfortable, which seems to be a common theme with this thing. And then finally, the final clash with Ansem. This phase is essentially the same as the beginning World of Chaos phase, except the laser beams appear far more often, and Ansem summons a black hole that shoots even more at you, and it's a great time. If you're able to survive all this mess coming at you, great job, you did it, woohoo, gold star. This is easily the most strange final boss of them all, but that's actually what makes it so great. It constantly keeps you engaged, and the challenge never lets up, so it's hard to get bored. The final encounter of the first game is still one of the best, and is only pushed down from the top because A, it's too long without a save point, so if you get stuck later on, or your game crashes, you have to do it all over again. And B, while the boss has a lot going on, it's deceivingly simple. Ansem only has a small handful of attacks, and it isn't that hard to just fly to the side until you feel safe enough to attack or heal. That being said though, this boss has passed the test of time, and remains to be an unforgettable and nostalgic final boss. Finally, it's time to destroy the mastermind behind all the events in the series up to this point. This final boss has a huge mantle to take on, being the final boss of the entire Darkseeker saga, and I am proud to say that they delivered. Unlike the previous main entries, Xehanort's final boss doesn't rely on a big monster or set piece or anything. It's just a personal showdown against Sora, Donald, Goofy, and Xehanort in his badass armor. God, this sounds so weird out of context. You know this fight is going to be something else when you enter a completely new world designed specifically for fighting this final encounter with Xehanort. As per tradition of the main Kingdom Hearts games, Xehanort faces you with multiple phases. In his first phase, he goes full Inception mode and turns the city sideways. His attacks deal heavy damage as he teleports all over the place, so it's best to use flow motion and air step to your advantage. After knocking some of his health, he sends you down to Rapture because everyone loves underwater controls, right? Luckily, this section is bearable if you time your heals correctly, and it goes by pretty fast, so it doesn't really take away from the experience. Once his health is low, he takes you back to Scala, but this time it's faced mass destruction. He uses his most powerful moves here, the lava spiral, his huge magnetic electric ball thingy, and his long combos while he teleports. The amazing thing is, all that I just described since the beginning was just his first phase. The second and final phase of the fight, Xehanort loses his armor and fights you head-on, full boomer mode. Xehanort floats around, and as per usual, he teleports and initiates long and powerful strings of attacks. Not long into the fight, he summons a beautiful looking platform and calls upon Kingdom Hearts. He doesn't really change his pattern too much here, but after some time, he forces you into rage form. Prisms of light circle around you like some Travis Scott concert, and if you're not careful, it is super easy to die here. Once you reclaim your light, all 13 vessels appear in their terrifyingly and unnaturally long chairs. And if you haven't learned to press square yet, well, now is the time to do it, or else you're in for a world of pain. Once Xehanort reaches the bottom of his health, you press triangle for the final move, and then you f***ing die. Yep, that's it. Game over, thanks for playing, everyone. Just kidding. Once you reach the death screen, your controller starts talking to you, and I'm not gonna lie, when this happened, I almost broke my controller from fear because I was not expecting it at all. Sora, Donald, and Goofy perform a final move together to defeat Xehanort for good, which is an extremely fitting way to end this saga. This fight is great. It has some of the most beautiful and impactful moments of any final boss, all while being entertaining. It isn't number one because while it is super solid, they could have gone a little bit further with their ideas in my opinion. I like it a lot though. It fills its role of being a superb final boss, which lands it in the top 3. But there is one more that beats it by quite a bit actually. Kingdom Hearts has a very respectable assortment of final bosses. None of them are bad respectively. Whether it's challenging your skills, culminating a long story, or providing amazing set pieces, these final bosses all deliver in one way or the other. But there's one final boss that sticks out from the bunch. It's the reason I wanted to make this video in the first place, and it probably will forever go down as my favorite final boss ever. And I doubt anything will ever top it. Kingdom Hearts 2's final boss is perfect. The music gives me chill bumps every time I listen. The pacing of the boss is perfectly crafted. The quick time events, oh my god, this is how you end a game. Yeah, sex is cool, but have you ever beaten the Kingdom Hearts 2 final boss? I know this video has been pretty long so far, so I'm gonna keep this as brief as possible because A, if you haven't experienced it already, what are you doing? And B, if you have already played it, you already know how amazing it is. The first phase contains a lot of satisfying quick time events, a lot of gravity-defying jumps, and several sections that are distinct from one another and are fun as hell. At the end of the phase, you face Xemnas in his armor, and the man is such an alpha male that he literally just sits in his chair the entire time and hits you with his long sword and guards. All the while, several weapons from Organization 13 are attacking you, and did I mention that this boss is amazing? I don't think I did. The second phase is probably the weakest phase, but that being said, it's a great inclusion of the gummy ship mechanic and is still an amazing part of the fight. The third phase is similar to the end of the first phase, except Xemnas has had enough of your so he pushes you away and you have to fly back. On your journey back, buildings and lasers block your way. There's so much more I want to say about this fight, but for time's sake, just know that it's pure bliss. Then finally, the best part, the final phase, good lord. This is a completely unadulterated fight against Xemnas himself. You have to dodge around thorn vines and large barrages of lasers, and this man dual wields lightsabers, which basically makes him tower on Malicos, but take away the Ben Swallow. Again, there's so much to this fight that makes it one of the best in video game history, but no words I can say about it will give it justice. It's balanced, it's easily the most thrilling boss in the entire series when it comes to emotional stakes and gameplay segments, especially the end of the fight, and if you've beaten the game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If I had to describe this entire final boss in one word, it would be payoff. Everything this game built up to led to this very final boss, and oh, it delivered alright. I don't think I have to go on any further to tell you that this is one of the best video game final bosses in not only just Kingdom Hearts, but in video game history. And with that, there's my list. Hope you guys enjoyed, and be sure to leave your favorites down below, and it doesn't just have to be Kingdom Hearts. Remember that this list is just my personal opinion, and not to take it too seriously. Again, if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to support by liking and subscribing. Plus, if you want to see more content like this, please let me know down below. Please follow my Twitter and Instagram in the description below for further updates on videos, and if you simply want to interact with me. My next project is going to be another Danganronpa ranking video, so be sure to look forward to that. If you have any suggestions for future rankings, please let me know down below and I will definitely consider them. I also quickly wanted to apologize for the wait for videos. College recently started for me and it's been keeping me quite busy. That's it from me for now. Remember everyone, stay safe and stay cool.